Hi, ladies and gentlemen, I'm John Munsell. This is Communicating Today. We've been on Channel 10 for a long, long time. I am the creator, the producer, and the host of this program. We're one of the longest running shows right here on Channel 10, Fairfax Public Access TV. Been on since way back in 1990. We come on 3 times every week, by the way. For you folks who watch us on a regular basis, we come on every Wednesday evening in prime time at 8:30 p.m. every Friday morning for you early birds when you're driving to work in the morning, and you probably can't see my show, but every Sunday afternoon at 3:30 when there's not a National Football League game on. But anyway, they're not playing right now, so we're okay. 3 times every week. We do have a wonderful show for you tonight. If you've been watching the news media lately, ladies and gentlemen, and who hasn't been, all the talk shows, we keep reading about something that's happening in our country today. It's called the national debt. And we keep hearing a magic number of the United States of America, our beloved country, is in debt up to here to the tune of $17 trillion and growing. Well, this is a terrible thing. We certainly can't live with this kind of a situation. Something has to be done about it. The Congress and the President are trying to get together and work together. The Democrats and the Republicans are trying, the liberals and the conservatives, and they can't seem to bring it all together. So what we're going to do tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we have a terrific show for you. We have an organization on called Fix the Debt. Now, doesn't that address that particular problem? It certainly does, in a certain way, because we have a very special guest sitting on my far side over here. His name is Nick Troiano, who is the co-founder, along with a few other people, of this wonderful organization that we're going to be featuring tonight, Fix the Debt. And we're going to talk about how this terrible problem affects younger people of his age. He's only in his 20s. Wanted to come on our show tonight to talk about that because they're worried about what's going to happen 5, 10 years, 20 years from now when they start to get into middle age and what have you, and hopefully make it to retirement someday with what's going on with this national debt. So we're going to be talking about that, and I have another gentleman who's sitting right alongside him here, my good friend Frank Szumilo, who works with me on our show quite a lot, and we do the Frank and John show for you folks who may watch that program every once in a while. Frank is an economist, a statistician with the federal government. He works with the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and he has a wonderful perspective, and that's why we brought him on the program tonight to talk about. Since I told him we were going to talk about this debt problem, we thought we could add Frank's perspective to it. And Frank, that's why you're here, and I know that you can't wait. You're sort of chomping at the bit to put in your 2 cents about this national debt problem. So I don't know if you want to add something at this point.
Thank you very much, John. It's a pleasure to be here, as always. And the topic that we're going to cover tonight is one of great importance to everyone, not someone who's in their 20s or 30s or even in their 80s. It affects everybody in the United States. And our guest tonight, Nick, is going to talk about what his role or what his generation's role should be in this problem.
Before we do that and get to Nick to find out a little bit more about his background and so forth, I do want to give credit and mention a very nice lady by the name of Heather Swift. Heather is an assistant to our guest, Nick Troiano, and Heather and I must have exchanged 20 or 30 emails back and forth, and she helped to put this show together tonight, gave me a lot of terrific information about the program, about the Fix the Debt organization, about Nick Troiano and so forth. So Heather, sitting out there as in our studio audience, thank you so much. We really appreciate your help. Now, Nick, let's start right out and find out a little bit more about you as our primary guest for tonight. Where are you from originally? I know before the show you were talking about you're from Pennsylvania, is that right?
Well, thanks for having me, John. I am originally from Milford, Pennsylvania, which is in the northeast part of the state, and lived there all my life until I came to school to Washington, D.C. a few years ago.
And where did you go to school up there? College?
I just finished my undergraduate at Georgetown University, and I'm completing my graduate studies there right now.
So you came all the way down from northeastern Pennsylvania to be here with us in the Washington, D.C. area?
That's right.
Right.
That's fantastic. Now, how did you get involved with this debt issue?
Well, it's really going on 4 years now that I went to a conference out in Chicago that a group called Mobilize.org hosted. And it was there where they brought young people from across the country to learn more about how the national debt is affecting and will affect our generation. And one of the things that stuck with me was a speaker that came to talk to us, and his name was David Walker. He's the former Comptroller General, really the top accountant of the United States. And he told us two things that stuck with me. The first is, the problem isn't so much of where we are now. Back then it was maybe $12 trillion of debt, now it's 17. The problem is where we're going. And if you look at the graph, you'll see an exponential growth in debt into the future. And he said, secondly, young people are going to be disproportionately affected by this problem, so young people need to be disproportionately involved. And it was after hearing him speak that I realized, well, young people are hardly involved at all. We don't understand how this problem is affecting us, no less have a clue about how to make an impact on it. So ever since then, beginning with my friend Ryan Schenicke, who I met at that conference, where we began collaborating to try to bring a greater youth voice to this issue. And that's what led to eventually to the Can Kicks Back forming with a few other co-founders last year, and we launched our campaign 6 months ago.
Some interesting statistics, Nick, when you say we know what the debt is today, $17 trillion and growing by leaps and bounds, but we don't know, we young people don't know where it's going to be next year or 5 years or, God forbid, 10 or 12 years from now. We do know that the national debt, which is now $17 trillion, is increasing at the rate of $4 billion every single day. Unbelievable. And there are 314 million of us Americans that live in the United States of America, three of us being three of the 314 million. If you had to pay off the debt today, pay off that $17 trillion today, it would cost Nick, Frank, and John, each of us, $53,000. We would have to write a check for to pay off that $17 trillion. It's a terrible situation, unbelievable. And we know how concerned you are from the young people's standpoint, and we can't blame you in the least. And that's why we appreciate so much your coming on our program, Nick, with Fix the Debt. So I guess, do you have a strategy in mind and some things that you think that you might like to try to pursue to hopefully prevent this terrible catastrophe from happening to you young folks 5 or 10 years from now?
Sure. Well, I think first it's important to say that not all debt is bad. Just like I've taken out a student loan to go and get an education, our country sometimes borrows to do legitimate things, to fight war, to get out of a recession, for example. What's different now than what has been in the past is that we're borrowing for everyday consumption because we have overpromised certain benefits and underfunded certain programs. So we need to fix that problem. And in our view, what that looks like is a solution that reforms entitlement programs to reduce the growth in spending, and that couples that with comprehensive tax reform. So we get rid of lots of tax loopholes and raise a bit more revenue. That total package of about $2.5 trillion over the next decade has the potential to reach the goal, and the goal is to bring our debt down to a sustainable level as compared to the economy.
Yeah.
And that is what we're sort of urging Washington to do. And it's only going to happen if both parties are able to work together and find common ground, because the fact of the matter is the path that we're on is unsustainable. The status quo means if Congress never comes back into session again, our debt's going to go up because a large portion of our budget, almost 2/3, is on essentially autopilot, meaning we keep sending certain checks out regardless if it's part of the annual appropriations process or not, and that's mostly through social insurance programs like Social Security and Medicare. So this is a problem that needs to be addressed proactively in order to be solved.
And so how are you going to go about doing that? How do you get into the technical aspect of it, which is really the political way of looking at this? Mm-hmm. We have congressmen who are opposed to us doing anything at all with the debt, but just keep spending. And we have conservatives who are saying, we can't do this anymore, we have to stop. Where do you come in on something like that?
Well, the real problem is that there's one political party who says no new taxes, and another political party that says don't touch those entitlement programs to a large extent. Now, there are leaders in both parties who are trying to break out of that mold. That's where we need them to do, because we're not going to get a solution unless everything is on the table. And what the Can Kicks Back is trying to do is organize a constituency of young people to put some more pressure on those elected leaders to say, you have to give up some of your sacred cows because we know the status quo is the worst option, and we need a reasonable compromise solution. And what we also try to point out to Republicans, for example, if you care about keeping taxes low, Well, debt is nothing but deferred taxation because eventually we're going to have to pay for today's borrowing. So in order to reach the solution, if you care about keeping taxes low, we have to deal with our debt problem. And for Democrats who really care about social insurance programs, Social Security and Medicare, we know that they're on an unsustainable trajectory. If we do nothing, Social Security, for example, isn't going to be able to pay full benefits in 2033. That's going to affect my retirement. Right. So those who care most about those programs should be most in favor of reforming them. And so they should care about getting a debt deal done. That's the message that we're trying to bring to leaders of both parties.
See, Frank and I, Nick, are a slightly different generation, as you can see for yourself. A little bit of gray here on the side. And we have to worry about the next maybe 10 or 15 years or so, but you got to worry about the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I mean, you're just starting out. You just got out of college a few years ago, Georgetown, and we can see exactly why you feel the way you do, and we appreciate so much that you're bringing it to our attention and telling the folks out here in Northern Virginia that watch Channel 10, we hope there are legions of you out there, folks who will watch this program. This is very inspirational and a very important show, and something that concerns not only Nick Troiano and Frank Szumilo and myself on this show tonight, but all of you people watching the program out there, you're all affected by this national debt of $17 trillion that's growing by billions of dollars. $4 billion tomorrow, it'll be $4 billion more than it is today. And the day after that, another $4 billion on top of that. So it just keeps growing. And I think, Nick, part of the thing, as you indicated a moment ago, is that there's an organization called Standard & Poor's. Standard & Poor's is a credit rating agency that everybody looks up to. And not too long ago, they downgraded the credit rating of the United States of America, of our beloved country, was downgraded as a less of a credit risk. And that's not a very good thing. That's a terrible thing for us to have to experience. And they said, quote, the reason why they did that was that the stability, the effectiveness of our political institutions have significantly weakened. And they said there's too much confrontation going on between the White House, the Congress, the Democrats, the Republicans, the liberals, the conservatives, as you just pointed out. They can't seem to get there. There's, instead of cooperation, as you mentioned, put everything on the table, unless nothing is dispensable, but we have to look at every possible solution to this problem. Exactly what Frank said, the same thing. So Frank, you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to dig in a little bit on what you had said before. You spoke about setting up this program for young people, and it just seems to me that young people don't stay young all the time; they get older. And so, how are you preparing to retain this organizational structure? How are you planning to keep going in the same direction? And so, with the new people who are coming in. Or how are you going to get new people?
Sure. So, well, first off, the idea of the can kicks back is that we've continually seen Washington kick the can down the road by delaying tough choices. And we want to organize a large enough group of young people, which we think is 100,000 by the end of this year, to kick back at Washington every time they punt a tough decision. We know who's representing older folks with the AARP, who's representing younger people. That's sort of the mission of our organization. And people can join at thecankicksback.org. Your viewers who have children, grandchildren who are young, send them the URL so they can get involved. We have over 100 local groups established in high schools, college campuses, young professional communities who we're trying to sort of convert into local leaders so they become their own sort of campaign managers.
You know what the word is, Nick? The word is communicate,
right.
Which is the name of my show, folks, Communicating Today.
And
I just got the 2-minute warning, Frank and Nick, so I got to go back to the camera for a few seconds and reintroduce the show for you folks who might have tuned in a little bit late. I'm John Munsell. This is Communicating Today. We've been on Channel 10 for a long, long time, well over 20 years, well over 600 programs. Come on 3 times every week. One of the longest running shows right here on this channel. And we have a wonderful show that we think very inspirational, very motivational, very important, very significant program for you tonight. It's all about the terrible thing that's going on in our country today called the national debt, which is now $17 trillion and growing in leaps and bounds. And we're trying to address that problem. Congress is trying to address it. The president is. And we don't seem to be making too much headway. And there's a lot of young folks that are going to be hurt by this. One of them is on our program tonight, Mr. Nick Troiano. of the Fix the Debt organization. He's telling us all about where are we going to be 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 years from now? What's going to happen to us? What's going to happen to our Social Security and Medicare and everything? So, Nick, we're back to you again. And as Frank just pointed out, is what are you guys doing to try to get the word out? And I threw the word in communicate, because that's what this program is all about. We're trying to tell the folks here in Northern Virginia, that the million or so that watch us, is that that's what this is all about, and that's what you're trying to do. And you're trying to increase the number of people that you have in your organization. How many people do you have now, roughly, that are part of the organization?
We have over 7,500 supporters across the country, 1,000 volunteers, and we're growing every day. And communication is important to us. And luckily for us, young people are part of the most connected, most passionate generation that I think this country's ever seen, and we're able to get a message out through social media, through text messaging, through email. And I think a lot of our generation has sort of built-in disadvantages. You know, there are fewer of us in office. We don't donate as much to political campaigns, so we're not listened to. But we do have the ability to organize. Barriers to organization and communication have fallen with connective technology like the internet, so we're leveraging that to build a stronger political voice for our generation.
Not everybody is as bright as you are, nor as well informed as you are.
We're very complimentary on this program, Nick, I must admit.
And we're doing a good job, yes. But one aspect of that is there are so many technical terms and so many technical complex procedures that need to be followed to be able to put something like this together. You need the data, you need the information, you need indicators, you need measures of what's going on in the economy so that you can better judge how good a job the Congress is doing. So along those lines then, what is your thought on doing something like that?
Well, first, as you point out, it is sort of a complicated issue. So we see part of our job as making this a very simple issue to understand. And the way I summarize it is how one person described it to me when I was on Capitol Hill once. And they said, if your outgo exceeds your income, then your upkeep is going to be your downfall. That's the situation that our country finds itself in right now. We continue to spend more money than we have. It's crowding out crucial investments in the future. And if young people want the same opportunity as our parents and grandparents, we have to change course from where we're on today. And for us, as I was saying before, we think that requires sort of a grand bargain, both parties coming together over tax and entitlement reform to achieve the amount of savings we need to put our debt on a downward path. And I think there are also sensible reforms that should be on the table. The president came out with one in his budget. It's known as chain CPI, which simply changes the measure of inflation to a more accurate one that would save a substantial amount of money and lengthen the life of Social Security, for example. That's something that we're seeing both parties come together on. There are more ideas out there that we need to see more of.
And I guess, too, fighting two wars, Iraq and Afghanistan, it's hundreds of billions of dollars to fight those two wars, not to mention the numbers of thousands of lives that were lost fighting those wars. And the terrible recession that we underwent at the beginning of the Obama administration, his first term, and so forth, when we thought we were going to get into one of those 1929 depressions that we had many, many years ago, that our families and our forebears remember going way back long before your time, Nick. And so many things going on that we had to borrow a lot of money, and we can understand why there's a need to borrow. And kids have to go to college, and they have to borrow money for educational purposes, student loan, for example, and to buy a car, to buy a house, a mortgage, and what have you. So there's reasons to loan. But the basic thing is, as you mentioned before, is you can't spend more, basically, than you take in. As an individual person, Frank, myself, and you, Nick, if you have a salary of $50,000 a year, you can't spend $55,000 a year. You can spend under $50,000 and break even, because if you spend $60,000 or $70,000, you're going to go in the hole and you're going to get in deep trouble, like the United States government is right now, the $17 trillion. So that's what they have to learn. That basic lesson: you can't spend more than you have coming in, and that's where we may have to raise taxes, and we may have to cut spending in other different ways and so forth. Frank, you want to add to that?
I was just going to ask about some of the things that are going on now, like some of the suggestions that you have made. What is the reaction in Congress? Have you had any feedback from them? Is there anything that they're looking at? Are you looking at getting in there and trying to get support from them as well? And how How are you going about that?
Well, in February, we brought 36 of our chapter leaders from across the country to Washington to have a series of meetings with leaders on Capitol Hill. And part of what we were saying is, let's accomplish 3 small steps to get towards solvency. Forget the policy for a minute. Let's create the environment where a deal can get done. The first thing we said is, you need to hear more from young people. There hasn't been a young person in front of the House Budget Committee testifying in the 3 years they had records on their website. So that was the first idea. The second idea was something called know the impact that the debt is going to have on future generations by reinstating something called generational accounting. It was done for a few years in the 90s, but they took it out because guess what? The numbers look bad. It basically lays out what's going to happen to each generation if we stay on our current course. The last generational accounting done by the IMF in 2011 showed that tax rates, net taxes on future generations, will have to be 21.5 points higher than they are today if we leave them the bill. That exceeds their capacity to pay. So the first step in solving the problem is knowing the facts. Let's get the information out there. And the third thing that we said to our leaders on the Hill was, to the extent that we have to make cuts in what's known as discretionary spending, really the part of the budget that includes investments in things like education, infrastructure, and research, we should be identifying the wasteful spending, but reinvesting a part of that into high-value investments so that we continue to grow as a country, so that we can be more competitive in a more globalized economy.
International community.
And that last part, I think, is really important, because the trajectory that we're on right now, that discretionary spending is going to be the smallest compared to our economy than it ever has been. That's the future that young people are going to inherit.
And one aspect of that, of course, is the interest that's being paid on the debt.
Right.
And so Congress is looking at the next 4 years and saying, wait a minute, what are we going to do with our money? We don't have a lot of money because we have to pay $435 billion a year in interest on our debt. And so it's not the debt itself that's a problem, but it's the interest we have to pay, which cuts into our discretionary income or expenditures.
That's right. And a lot of people claim, the debt doesn't matter now. It's an issue for 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. But as you point out, interest is a problem right now. It's $230 billion this year. It's going to be over $800 billion 10 years from now. That's money we can't be spending elsewhere, no matter what your priorities are.
Yeah, the COB has identified that the next 4 years, our payments toward the, if we get involved with the money that's coming in, then I think what they have to do is they have to give more thought to bringing in other people to help. And something like that would work.
There's another factor too, Frank and Nick, and that is that waste, abuse, fraud. I've heard statistics that in the Medicare program alone, for example, there are hundreds of billions of dollars are being wasted. There's all kinds of fraud going out there, and the FBI and the CIA and all these law enforcement agents are going there breaking in on organizations of fraudulent claims on the Medicare and so forth. And so if you cut out a great percentage of the fraud and the waste and the duplication of a lot of programs are duplication in the education field, for example. There's a whole bunch of different things that they lap over one another, and a lot of those duplication programs can be eliminated and gotten rid of, saving again tens of billions of dollars, and so forth. So there's ways to do that, and but they have to make up their mind to get started on this now, and they have started, but they're not making enough progress. And you guys, the future generations, are the ones that are going to get hurt. That's for sure. So you can see why you're so concerned about it.
Right. And I think you're right. There is waste, there's fraud, there's abuse, there's duplication, and solving that will help us towards our debt problem, but it won't solve it. The primary driver of our debt is rising healthcare costs. More people are in a system that's having more services that are becoming more expensive. And as a country, we need to figure out a way to drive down healthcare costs, because that is the primary driver of the debt. There are 10,000 people retiring every single day of the baby boomer generation going on Social Security and Medicare, so that only will compound the problem if we don't get it under control.
So if our debt is going up, the interest we have to pay is also going up. So the next 2 years, our interest payment is going to be $1.6 trillion for the 3 years. And then the next 4 years, it's going to double. it's going to be $3.76 trillion that we're going to be paying in terms of what we're borrowing. I mean,
We
so
could talk
we
about
can't
this
lose it.
program from now until ad infinitum, but I just got the less than 2-minute warning, which is just like in the football games, gentlemen, when the referee blows the whistle and waves the red flag, he says, gentlemen, the game is almost over, and this program is almost over. I wish we had another hour because I think there's so much we can talk about. Nick, you're a very interesting guest. We really appreciate your coming on our program and enlightening the people out there watching our show. And maybe there's a couple of congressmen out there. Maybe President Obama has one of his assistants out there watching our program. We would hope so, to let these folks know what the young people want to know about. And you've brought that point home very clearly. We thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the show. Frank, thank you for offering your opinion, too. We really appreciate it.
Just one more question, John.
Because
Just
I got to
one
start
question.
signing off
I
pretty
know
quick.
that.
Go ahead.
How can interested young people get involved?
It's one website, thecankicksback.org. We're looking for new supporters, and we'd be happy to have you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Frank and Nick.
Thank you.
Nick Troiano with
Thank you for having me.
Fix the Debt is the name of the organization. We will see you all next week, ladies and gentlemen. In the meantime, we always go out by saying, keep on communicating for success. Fix the debt, success. Thank you so much, folks. We'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.